Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 9 a.m. and the live stream has commenced. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, council, town staff, residents. I see that we do, in fact, have quorum for this morning's meeting. I call it into session. And our first item is to have the national anthem. I ask all those, please stand if able. And today's rendition will be Myla Bulgar, a little lady from Welland.
From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
I hope the young lady will forgive us for the interference. Next on the agenda is the reading of the land acknowledgement, and this morning, Councillor Nesnick has the honor.
Good morning. The town of Pelham is situated on treaty land steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is protected within the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island live and work in Niagara. The town of Pelham stands in solidarity with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, acknowledging that our high standard of living is a result of the resources and lasting friendship of Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Councillor. I now turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 4, being the adoption of the agenda. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the agenda for November 6, 2024, regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, any comments from council? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Motion carries. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings you to item number 5, being disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any council member have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 6.1.1. We are joined this morning by Carol Nagy of Hospice Niagara. Ms. Nagy, I would welcome you to the podium and remind you that you have 5 minutes to present.
Ms. Nagy, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you very much for having me to speak to you today. It's been, I think, the second time that I've been out to this council, so I will be brief this morning. I wanted to update you on what is happening with the Welland Hospice, which likely your residents are going to use, as well as the St. Catharines Hospice that currently exists. We have now turned the corner, and our construction's well underway, and we're anticipating opening in August next year. So right now the campaign is looking at how we can furnish this home to take it from just a building into a home, much like the home that we have at the Stabler Center, but also your own homes. We were privileged this year to have Craig Bowman, who was a firefighter in Welland, be served through the hospice in in St. Catharines. Craig and his family were so pleased with the care that they're allowing us to use his story as part of this campaign, so that we hopefully can raise community awareness about hospice care, about all the services we provide, but also for community help to help make this new hospice a home. We really are at the point of the campaign where we are looking for linens. We're looking at how we can afford the beds, the furniture, the microwave, everything that you would have in your own home that makes you feel comfortable, makes your life easier, is what we're hoping to accomplish at hospice. I don't think that we need to show any of the slides. We're good with this one. We also are asked, this is a large campaign gone out to all community members. We're at service clubs as well talking about this, because any amount that people can give, certainly from the town, is very helpful. We're looking to raise about $700,000 in order to make this hospice a home. So it's not a tall ask. I want to thank this council and this city for being very generous with your donations towards the capital campaign. It was $85,000, and next year your last payment of that $17,000 will be received, and I can't thank you enough for getting us to this point in the campaign.
Okay, thank you for that presentation and for joining us this morning at council. Is there any questions from councilors want to ask of the presenter? Councilor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to mention that there's a lot of services. Reading through your reports here, I read through your annual report and your most recent, I believe it was called Your Impact Report. And you had an item in there that caught my eye, and it was a nurse call system that you have. And I guess that's for home care, people that choose to live at home and can't go to hospice care, because I think this is really a valuable thing, because aging is going to be different for all of us. And we're not all going to have the services of long-term care or anything available to us just simply because we can't afford it. But if you could describe that for me, and how this serves people that live in Pelham in their homes and have chosen to do that, because, you know, and I think that I'd appreciate knowing a little more about that.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for that question. We have a number of services that help people from the time of diagnosis to stay in their home and live well. That's the focus of all of our services. How can we make sure that when somebody is living with progressive illness, that they are managing as well as they can? So are their caregivers. So we support caregivers through our programs, providing education and support to caregivers, because that is a long journey for people. We also support the person who's been diagnosed. We provide pain and symptom management through an expert team of specialists the new name is Ontario Health at Home. I was going to say OHA, that's the short form. So we provide nurse practitioners and a palliative care physician that go in and provide one-to-one support in people's homes, making sure that their pain is managed, their questions are answered, and making sure they have a plan of what comes next for them in this illness journey. We also have what you're describing as virtual care monitoring, where one of our very specialist nurse who's been working in palliative care for her entire career is on the phone, ready to help families answer their questions. Maybe they're transitioning from hospital home. That's a time when some things can go wrong and there's lots of questions. Our remote care monitoring nurse is there to help. We also have a lot of day programs for people who are living at home to take that person who has the illness and put them back in community. It's what we all do regularly, where we meet with our friends, but when you're living with that long-term illness, your life can become isolated. So we bring those people to programs, giving their caregivers a break for the day, and making sure that person still has that community, still feels like they're a vital part of the community. So lots and lots of different programs that we provide for people living at home. We're not just a hospice building. We are in homes. We provide bereavement support for children as young as 5 all the way through adults in a number of different ways. Music therapy is one of our programs. I just heard the other day of a 9-year-old who wasn't able to articulate how he was feeling about his father's death for months and months and months, and then finally through our program was able to start to talk about it. And we use one of these fancy computer games that projects onto the ceiling or onto the floor, and he really got hooked and was able to say, you know, I can start talking about my dad while he's playing the game. So a lot of different kinds of programs that we offer, and they are all at no cost to people, because we really believe this care needs to be available for everyone in our community.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that this is one of the biggest mega trend of our time is aging, and aging is being reframed and redefined all the time. So I'm grateful that we have hospice to take care of this, because my own experience with it has been excellent. It wasn't a family member, it was a neighbor, and we gathered together as a group to support the neighbor. And hospice was there when we needed it, of course, for the very, very important medical things that happen. So I'm grateful for you to hospice for advancing human-centered policies and practices that are to the benefit of everybody in the community, because we're all basically, as you get a little older, you're one accident, one illness away from, having to change your lifestyle. And I want to live at home as long as I possibly can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions to the presenter? Not seeing any. Again, I thank you for appearing before this council today and bringing your message. And yes, this council, as you noted, did indeed put forward the $85,000, and we were very extremely happy to do that, realizing just how important your organization is to the community. And we will be considering your request at budget time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Niznik. Be it resolved that council receive the from Carol Nagy, Executive Director of Hospice Niagara, regarding the Make Hospice a Home campaign for information. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments from any councillors on the presentation? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 6.1.2, and we are joined this morning by Kevin Coyle and Tom Hounsel of the Fonthill District Kinsmen, and you are both invited to the podium. Please be reminded that you have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Gentlemen, welcome this morning to council meetings, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. We're very happy to be here.
If you could just turn on the microphone before you proceed, that'd be great. Thank you. Perfect.
I think it's on now. So yes, we're very happy to be here. I am Tom Hounsel. I'm the president of the Kinsmen, although I've only been a member for a year. I think this is actually some kind of hazing ritual they do. I want to start by apologizing for the brief we submitted. I don't think I understood how public this was going to be when it was submitted. We're a bunch of curmudgeonly old men that really are not very politically savvy. I also want to start by giving great thanks to the town and particularly its staff for all the help that we've given. We had the craft show recently, and it was a fantastic success. And I want to make it very clear that nothing that we're here to say to you today is in any way supposed to be reflected on the staff. Vicky in particular has had to deal with the most curmudgeonly of us, I know, and we're working on it, and we appreciate all your support. But I'm going to walk you through what it's been like for my time in 1 year in the Kinsmen. I live on Memorial Drive, and I saw them meeting there at the old town hall, and decided to check it out. And shortly thereafter, I was told, well, we're not going to be meeting here next year because we're getting pushed out of this space. And so that's okay. So all right. And then one of the early tasks that I ended up helping with was getting stuff out of the MCC, because there's some storage that we had there, some signage and whatnot for shows. And we were told, no, you can't have it there. So that got pushed out. And we got this home show that we're working on. And basically there are hundreds of hours, and I'm not exaggerating when I say hundreds of volunteer hours went into preparing for that home show. And then it didn't happen because of an equipment failure. And it's like, wow, that's pretty shocking. That's a lot of hours down the drain. It's really not hard, not easy to get people to join us, and to have all that time just turned into wasted time was really a bitter pill to swallow. So what we're here for today, it says compensation, but that's, in our outline, we've suggested a few ways where that might be possible. I know that some of those might not be practical. We're really here to make sure, the relationship between any two parties is part business and part casual and just getting along, and we're just wanting to make sure the dial's adjusted the right way, because as I can reflect on my own experience, and I'm sure this reflects the general attitude of the members, is, wow, we're just kind of surprised that all the things we've been pushed on. We've been pushed on dates as well. We traditionally held, not always, but traditionally held our show the first week of April, and that's been pushed for very good business reasons on your part, I'm sure, to the second week of April. But it pushes us into competition directly with another show, which is bad for business. And so just overall, we just want to make sure that the dial between business and relationship is set right, and that you fully appreciate what it costs the members, what it costs us in terms of lost revenue for things like hospice, where our monies generally go. But most of all, I think that when it was all said and done, I remember being at a meeting and saying, well, wow, that's like a really terrific loss. Like, what is the city, the town going to do about this? And I'm sure there's more to this story, but what I heard back was they said we should contact our insurer. And so, a visit to say, hey, we're sorry, and how can we help, would have been really helpful to encourage members to come back and do this again next year. And we do look forward to any kind of compensation that you think might be possible. Our doors are open, our ears are open, and we are very sorry to be having to make this sort of presentation. And we look forward to continued great relationship in the future, and I invite any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Before I go to council, I just want to assure you that I believe every member on this council realizes the great work that the Kinsman has done for the town and for the surrounding areas. You raised a lot, there's an adjective I would have put in there, but let's just say a lot of money over the years. And we have had, and the town and the Kinsman have had a great working relationship. Vicky, of course, being our main ambassador, she reaches out to all the service clubs and any wrinkles that develop in the relationship. She's the one that works through them. So again, thank you for the presentation. Before I go to council, I would like to go to Ms. Van Ravensway. And how have we cooperated in the past on the farm show, Ms. Van Ravensway?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, over the years, you're part of us, so we cooperate as much as possible. I know that both of you gentlemen are new to the club, so bear with me. Actually, when you say that it was normal to have it the first week, it actually wasn't normal to have it the first week of April. What we had was the first year that prior to moving to the MCC, it was always the second or third week at Hay Street. And then the first year, which was 2019, you did have the home show the first week, and it worked out. Although council at the time did have a resolution stating that if, in fact, the playoffs went into April, that you would need to use the Doulaban Arena instead of the Exhibitor. And lo and behold, it was right up till we were able to take out the Exhibitor and you're able to use the Exhibitor Arena. After that, of course, we all experienced COVID, and then the next time was 2022, which was April 8th and 9th, which is the second week. And that works out really well for us because hockey goes until at least, we're dedicated to March 31st, and it takes us a good 8 to 10 days to take out the ice. And then 2023, it was actually April 13th to 16th, which was the third week. This past year, it was agreed that you would have the first week, which was April 4th to 7th. And again, OMHA playoffs went to the Saturday prior to your home show, which was started to be on the Thursday, and which was also Easter weekend, which was lovely. So staff worked night and day trying to get that ice out and ready for you. and lo and behold, we had to cancel the show. So unfortunately, the first week just doesn't work for us. Also, last fall, council signed a new agreement with the junior hockey team, in which in their agreement, it states that if their playoffs go into April, that they would still have access to the exhibitor arena. And then at that point, we would have to decide to take out dual ban if that's the wish of council. So I know it's difficult, and I would just encourage you, the home show is a whole different deal. It's a community show, and I believe the community would support your show.
Okay. Am I to respond to that?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Please.
I don't disagree with anything Vicky said, of course. And again, it's just a matter of perception. When I look at these 5 dates that are shown in our document, I can see that most of them are the first week in April. So it might not be, pushing might not be the word that you would use for it, but as a member of the club, it feels like, well, we're getting pushed into later in April. And it's just part of a general feeling based on a bunch of decisions that are all probably logical and make a lot of sense individually, but collectively, I just want you to know what this is adding up to.
Okay, thank you for that. Again, as Ms. Van Ravensway has stated, we have to look after our long-term yearly contracts, and that contract in this particular case belongs to the junior B team, and we have to, and that's in the contract, so that's the way we have to handle that. Anyway, I'll open the, Ms. Van Ravensway, the rental agreements on, for the home show, we have picked them up with grants in the last couple of years, have we?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. So annually, the Kinsman, and you've done it again, you applied for waived fees for this year it's the craft show and the home show. As per our municipal policy, if the money is available, we would allow up to $4,000 a year per organization. And we have, $26,000 to divvy up between multiple groups. And annually, what you normally would get is your craft show and the use of the Old Palm Town Hall. And just a little correction, we'd love to have you at the Old Palm Town Hall. I'm not quite sure why you left, but it's still available Tuesday nights.
The reason we left, can I
Yeah.
respond? It's the meals. We have to send those out, and one of our members was orchestrating that, but she's not with us anymore, so it was kind of the meals. So that's why we wanted a home base, so it wasn't
Well, it's
back
actually,
and forth.
it's not so much about the rental of the Tuesday nights as it is there's a space in there that we've been using as an office. I don't know where the agreement is that has allowed us to use that as an office, but we've been told to get our stuff out of there, and we actually just removed a refrigerator from there the other day, and the rest of the stuff will be gone by the end of the year. Because as I understand it, that's what we've been told to do.
Okay, thank you. If it is just a food matter, Vicky does make a heck of an omelet.
Yeah.
I just want that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not just the food, it's mostly about the space.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to the CAO for any comments that this unfortunate incident, meaning the transformer fire, ended up having an effect on the town for sure. Mr. CAO?
I would start by saying that the town's relationship with the group you represent is a key one in providing service to the community, and I would agree that it's at a low point as a result of a couple of files. And lastly, I'd submit that we could both stand some looking in the mirror, and I think we'd like to find a positive way forward. So I think that's the important thing here. It should be said that the corporation of the town of Pelham is out $339,000 because of a fire that And if you're looking for who the primary victim is, it's the municipal corporation on behalf of the entire community. We've quantified the loss at $339,000. 11,000 of that is lost revenue to us, facilities we weren't able to rent to groups that we would have but for the fire, and the rest is property / direct costs of remediation and et cetera, labor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So $339,000. And we're still interacting with our insurance company, and we expect ultimate resolution of that, but that hasn't happened yet. So the town is out $339,000. And that week, as with every other type of business, you have ebbs and flows. And that week, you have to understand how much work and effort. It sounds innocuous and easy to remove ice. It's actually an extremely laborious process. You're open 17 hours a day, and they go 17 hours at it. You have to slowly bring the temperature up. All the ice turns to water. The water has to go somewhere. You have to, I don't personally know how to do it all, but ultimately you change the decals or not under the ice, and you build it back up. And so it's like a major undertaking that we try to do one time a year. And we were full court pressing on that to get that ready. That's where we were when a fire happened. So it's problematic and difficult for the corporation to respond in the way you'd like it to, since our losses are, in relative terms and with respect, staggering. It's $339,000 at this point in time, and we haven't been made whole on any of that. So just so you understand that, that's revenue foregone, and that $11,000 represents a lot of community rentals and a lot of events we didn't want to cancel, and a lot of missed opportunities for the community to come together and celebrate in all sorts of, in sport, in cultural things, and just a whole bunch of stuff we lost. Your show was the most high profile and the most significant, and would have had the most number of people of the events that we lost, but it was one amongst dozens and dozens that went down, unfortunately, in that period. So beyond that, like the rest of the staff, I sit here and wait for any direction, but it's $339,000. We've not been made whole, and we were doing everything we humanly could. You understand that if we do, we have a fundamental problem, and the art of running a good community center is serving the entire community. I don't know. I think it would be extremely difficult, even if we could, to tell the hockey teams that are home here all year round that, yeah, you can't have the playoff games here. So that's a challenge for us. But even moving forward, understand that it takes a week to get that ice ready. So it's actually if you move forward 1 week, you're actually moving forward 2 weeks from our perspective. It isn't, we can't turn it around overnight. Literally, it's a lot of days, a very extremely long days, far longer than a normal business day to get the ice up and down. So understanding there's some operations and practicalities with that part of the request. Then there's conflict amongst community groups. And then lastly, with respect to the MCC operations, we have a significant financial problem this year of major magnitude. And that's not been resolved yet either. So that's my perspective, for whatever that's worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. I will now, any,
Respond to that?
Go ahead,
Just to quantify, I appreciate the $339,000. I was a vendor in that show when I'm a strong supporter of it. My business alone lost $80,000 from the show. So to quantify the total loss, it's closer to $1 million for all the vendors, the kinsmen, and everything. So we share that grief with you. What we're asking for in the future is maybe to work together a little more closely. Help us out this year. I'm the one who's chairing the show, myself and Jamie, and we want to make this great. We have to go head to head with the big show, the Jenkins show in St. Catharines. I went in that show last year. It's not as good as our show. I paid $1,600 for it, and I had probably 1/6 the results from the Pelham show. So it stung. And we want to make sure, because I have to go head-to-head with that show this year. So we want to hopefully get some help from the town somehow with something extra. So we have to come up with something that's going to make our show more attractive, and we got to do it quickly before all the booths are gone. So if there's other areas that we could possibly utilize, we can enhance the show somehow. I think that's what's going to solidify us as being the primary show. The Jenkins show is not, it's just a money grab. They have no exclusivity in their vendors. They'll just let, 5 painters go in. But our show is a special show. It has a different personality to it. And I recognize that instantly. I've been in the show, I think it's it would have been 4 years. But it stung. So I appreciate what you're saying. Ours is like threefold.
And
Okay.
uninsured, basically, because we suppose we could have bought insurance for our own direct losses, but it would have been very difficult to try to guesstimate what the losses of the vendors themselves were and try to insure that in any way. So there's a difference in that respect as well. And also, it was not a fault on our part, right?
Yes.
Right, yeah.
And just to be clear, it wasn't a fault on our part.
Well, I know it was an accident, but it was an accident on property you own,
Yes.
right?
Actually, we didn't own that.
Okay.
Oh, no, we did own that one. And we don't own it now. Ontario Hydro owns it now.
Okay.
So the next time.
Next
God
time
for-
it'll be your vendor.
Next time, heaven forbid, it'll probably be fixed in 3 or 4 days because we won't have to go through insurance companies. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
Council, any members of council have any questions to the presenters? Councilor Nesnick.
Hello, yes, thank you, and I do agree, your show is above and beyond terrific. I look forward to going to it every year, and I know it's always a very well-attended event, and I have also been to the other one that you mentioned, and you're right, bar none, yours is by far much, much better. I guess my question is actually over to Ms. Van Ravensway with regards to would the rental costs have been to the Kinsmen for that event? If you have that off the top of your head, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the rental cost, I believe, is around $3,000, more or less, with $2,500, $2,700 with tax.
For the weekend?
Yeah.
Okay, so as I said, when we look at, your asks, it looks as though that might be the one that we could certainly contemplate helping you with. So I'm comfortable with working towards coming up with a resolution towards the rental costs for you folks. As far as the date, it does kind of make it sense that you don't want to be there waiting on bated breath. Is the ice going to be out? Is the floor going to be dry for you? So moving to that second week makes a little more sense, even though you're going to be going up against there. I think you have a good enough reputation that people would, if they're going to one, they're going to come to both, is my thought. But anyways, and as far as the cover the cost to compensate, I'm not sure whether the town has any feasibility of doing that. But certainly I'd like to focus on the rental costs for your group as well. Okay, so those would be my thoughts. We can work on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments at this time? If not, I will ask Councilor Nesnick to put forward a resolution. I don't see any other comments. Councilor, you want to put forward?
Yep, so I would like to put forth a resolution that Town of Pelham waive future rental costs to the Kinsman Corporation for the use of the MCC during the April home show.
And is there a time
For a
frame on
time
that?
frame, so they've asked for 5 years. So for 5 years.
Okay. If I probably the first, I'll let Councillor Wink because I think we're on the same wave. Go ahead, Councillor.
So, just to be clear, Kinsman's getting a grant to cover off those costs for already. So it's not, this wouldn't be in addition to. So they're getting $4,000 a year for this show and the craft show. So why are we putting through a motion to grant them free access to it when we're giving them money for free access to the show?
Go ahead, Counselor.
Well, my understanding was the $4,000 was used for the craft show and the rental of the Old Town Hall, not for the home show one. But
We'll go
maybe we
back
can
to,
clarify that.
Ms. Van Riemenzo.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, in the past, it went up to 4,000 just by the cost of the craft show and the rental of the home show, or the Old Pound Town Hall. Although, at this time, they're not renting the Old Pound Town Hall any longer, so the waived fees for that would not be included. So there, you could include the home show and the craft show.
But again, to the counselor's point, isn't that already covered with the $4,000 grant?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the $4,000 grant, I believe with the two shows, it would be somewhere around $5,000 for the two shows. So the policy reads that we would support up to a $4,000 figure.
Counselor, can I go to the CEO, Counselor? Sure. Okay, CEO, please.
I think rather than fretting over the exact number, I'll also point out that our fees and services bylaw is going to come to you in a month or less. And although I don't 100% know, I think we are going to be looking to charge more next year and years going forward. So rather than fretting over the exact dollar amount, I think possibly a fair saw-off, if for council's consideration, would be one, to simply word a motion so that the so that the Kinsmen pay no money between those two shows. There's already a $4,000 credit we're prepared to entirely apply, and whatever the overage is. But I might suggest you also limit that to 2 years, which is the balance of your term and your mandate, and maybe not make the decision for a future council. So I think that could recognize the fact that certainly the Kinsmen are blameless, and I think victim is a fair descriptor. Having done nothing wrong, there's a financial loss. It's not different for the town, but they're an excellent community partner, and we'd like to get things back on track. So I think there's a way to not take any money from the Kinsmen Group in 2025 and 2026. And if that's sought in future years, so be it. But I think that would be a later addition of the Kinsmen 2 years from now, and the same or a different council, as time will tell here. So that might be a reasonable saw-off, where we don't have to fret about the exact dollars. It'll be something in the ballpark of 1,000 to 3,000. One would assume.
Thank you. So let's turn to the clerk, as usually she's done her magic. Can you read us the resolution?
I believe so. That the town of Pelham waive future rental fees to the Kinsmen for the use of the MCC during the April home show and for the use of the Old Town Hall for the craft show for the next 2 years.
Okay. Councilor Nesnick, are you happy with that? Oh,
Well, I'm seeing,
Yes, let's go back to Ms. Van Riemenzo.
Both events are held at the MCC.
Oh, they're both, okay.
Back to you, Ms. Nesnick.
yeah, the Old Town Hall might be a little small for your home show. Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
And then I'd be looking for a seconder on that motion.
Is there a seconder? Councilor Wink will second.
Okay, thank you to Mr. Mayor for discussion.
Okay, so on this resolution, any further discussion? I see none. I will call the vote. In favor of the resolution, all those in favor? I see none opposed. Resolution passes. Thank you. Gentlemen, again, thank you for appearing before council this morning, and like I say, we've had a great relationship in the past, and perhaps there are some wrinkles that both sides have got to work at to going ahead. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a clarifying question about this? Because I'm sure it'll come up at our next meeting. So that's basically just over and above we have to use the permissive grants first, and then the rest is going to be, that's what the nature of this is? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Is this a credit, basically?
The way I interpret that direction from council is that we will not seek compensation from you for those 2 shows in the spring and the fall
Yeah,
for the next 2 years.
right. The reason for my question was, if the town hall is still going to be available, if we think of an event that we could run there, would we be able to apply our permissive grant to the old town hall and then still get our shows for free for the next 2 years, or start with the grant first?
I once took a negotiation class with, and we were taught how to address when someone gives someone an inch and they take a mile. I think the council makes $26,000 available to the entire community. Your group's allotment or share of that is $4,000, and every year we make no bones about making sure you get 100% of that, and we're very happy to do that. But there are an inordinate amount of excellent community groups in the town of Pelham, and our volunteer sector is extremely vibrant, and it's something to love and cherish about this community. But all of those other groups are meritorious as well. So I think bird in the hand might be the right way to go.
I think our concern there is, as I know Kevin told me very well, we're afraid he's going to bring the circus in.
Thanks very much for your time.
Okay, again, thanks for the presentation, gentlemen. Thank you. To the clerk.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we move on, I also have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive the presentation from Kevin Coyle and Tom Hounsel of the Kinsmen regarding compensation requests for the 2024 home show for information. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion passes. Again, thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item 6.2, presentation, a presentation regarding natural asset management project results. And we are joined this morning by Samantha Witkowski, Environmental Coordinator for the Town of Pelham.
Thank you. Ladies, you have the floor.
Good morning. So I know Sam was called to the microphone, but I'm going to jump ahead of her for a minute to introduce her. So I'm Shannon LaRock, the manager of planning for the town of Pelham, and this is Samantha Witkowski. She's our new environmental coordinator who we share with the town of Lincoln. And Sam and I are going to provide this presentation this morning, mostly Sam, to highlight an exciting project that has recently been completed by the town. It's the Pelham Greenbelt Natural Asset Management Project. There we go. As many are aware, Council made environmental and climate adaptation a priority in the 2023 to 2027 strategic plan. And in late 2022, town staff identified natural asset management as a valuable tool that would help us to achieve that priority. As a result, we applied for a grant through the Greenbelt Foundation, and we were successfully awarded that grant. Work on the project began in 2023 with the help of our consultant, the Natural Asset Initiative. And this project is a key step toward identifying, measuring, and valuing Pelham's natural assets like forests, wetlands, woodlands, green spaces that provide essential services to our community. And at this time, I'll turn the presentation over to Sam, who will walk us through the project's goals, objectives, key findings, and recommendations for next steps that came out of this project.
Thank you, Shannon, for that introduction and the background to the project. Before getting into the details about this project, I would like to start with an overview of natural asset management. Of course, Council is familiar with typical asset management for a municipality, which involves tracking and maintaining traditional infrastructure like roads, bridges, and buildings. Natural asset management takes a similar approach or way of thinking, but applies it to ecosystems like forests, wetlands, and waterways. And while this is a relatively new way of thinking, as of 2024, municipalities are required to include natural asset in their asset management programs under a new Ontario regulation. So this project has helped us in meeting that requirement. And in general, managing these natural assets is important because they provide critical services to our community, such as stormwater management, air quality improvement, flood control, among a host of other benefits, in a sustainable and cost-effective way as well, in comparison typically to built infrastructure. So to that end, the aim of this project was to identify, measure, value, and ultimately provide recommendations for how we can preserve and manage Pelham's natural assets and therefore maintain the essential services that they provide. There were 3 objectives associated with this goal. First, understand the current roles that natural assets play in providing stormwater management and flood mitigation services to the community. 2, quantify the value of natural assets in terms of the services they provide. And 3, develop strategies for long-term management based on this understanding. The project focused on 2 related scales. The first broader scope was the Town of Pelham municipal boundary. This allowed us to hone in on where and how we can undertake natural asset management on a jurisdictional scale. And then the modeling component of the project focused on the Upper 12 Mile Creek sub-watershed, which intersects with the Ontario Greenbelt and Town of Pelham's municipal boundaries, as seen in this figure here. Importantly, many of these natural assets are not exclusively owned or sometimes even entirely located within the Town of Pelham, yet they still provide services to our community, and so this project sought to capture that. Moving on to some of our key findings from this project. It began with developing an inventory to tell us what natural assets are present and their condition as well. The inventory component defined a total of 4,428 individual assets across just over 10 hectares of land. And in assessing their condition, overall, nearly 40% of these assets were in very good or good condition, particularly our forests and wetlands. Meadows, aquatic, and hedgerow assets had rankings across the full range of scores from poor to very good. A great outcome to highlight from this stage of the project is the online interactive dashboard, which is freely available for public use. This dashboard shows the full inventory of natural assets, including their condition assessment. So it's a great visual tool that can be used to explore these natural assets and their corresponding data in a little bit more detail. Then, in order to develop a deeper understanding of the role that natural assets play in managing stormwater, the project also conducted an assessment of stormwater management services provided by these assets. Our biggest key takeaways from this assessment were that our natural assets were shown to significantly contribute to preventing flooding and erosion in our community. The value of stormwater services is roughly $6 million based on the capital cost to replace similar services with built infrastructure. And that in comparison to the performance of our natural systems, built infrastructure had mixed effectiveness in reducing flooding. And it should also be noted that these types of solutions also typically come with higher construction and maintenance costs in the long term. We also took it a step further, recognizing that natural assets can also provide other additional benefits to our community, such as carbon sequestration, fresh water supply, supporting biodiversity, and more. So taken together, the combined value of these benefits was estimated to range from $22 million to just about $25 million per year. Through the completion of this project, we now have a better understanding of how much value these natural assets provide and why it is important to proactively manage and protect these resources. They're not only vital to the delivery of services in our community, but if managed effectively, they also provide additional services as time goes on. But natural asset management is an ongoing and iterative process. So to that end, this project provided 11 recommended next steps for Pelham to undertake to better protect and proactively manage our natural assets. Each of the 11 recommendations is detailed in our full technical report, but we have grouped them into 3 overarching takeaways here. A, protect existing natural spaces. B, make evidence-based decisions to manage natural assets. And C, build awareness and partnerships. So to end this presentation, I'll briefly discuss each of these. You'll see here that I have jumped to C, build awareness and partnerships. And that is because this has been our priority area of focus over the last few months and for the remainder of 2024. We are continuing to build not only staff and council awareness, but also awareness in our greater community as well. We have hosted a stakeholder workshop in June where we invited many community groups, Indigenous groups, members of staff and council to attend and ask questions or provide feedback on the project results. This current presentation was another important step in building that awareness and support for the project internally. And we are also working with our funders and collaborators, the Greenbelt Foundation and the Natural Assets Initiative Group, to develop other communications materials surrounding this project as well. Through these ongoing activities and discussions, we are also cognizant of the different key players that may need to be involved in our natural asset management strategies, and we hope to continue building those partnerships to advance our shared goals. Moving back to our first key takeaway, protecting our existing natural spaces so that we can continue to sustain Pelham's environmental and community benefits. This project has identified a number of different actions that will contribute to this goal. One important aspect will be the review and update of policies and bylaws to ensure that our efforts are prioritized and integrated into town operations. For example, Town of Pelham is in the process of updating its official plan, and in doing so is looking at updating policies to support protection and enhancement of natural assets in the town. Additionally, identifying priority areas of naturalization so that we can enhance green spaces and continue to support biodiversity and ecosystem health. This might involve assessing underutilized or degraded lands that could benefit from restoration, with focus on locations that would enhance biodiversity and connectivity. As well as securing and protecting priority forests and wetlands by designating key areas for conservation, as well as collaborating with organizations like conservation authorities so that we can continue to preserve these assets. And then finally, using evidence-based decision-making to manage natural assets. By basing our approach on data and structured strategies, we can ensure that our resources are managed more effectively and sustainability. So this might involve proactively monitoring and managing erosion sites to prevent any further damage in high-risk areas. Formalizing invasive species management, again, to protect biodiversity and act swiftly against invasive threats. Strengthening our assessment of natural assets and related services to help us better understand the value and function of these assets over time. And even developing a costed lifecycle management strategy, which takes into account maintenance, budgeting, service delivery to ensure that to ensure sustainable management of these assets. This is a big undertaking. There is a lot of work ahead, and it is complex. But these project results have provided us with a great start in not only understanding the current state of our natural assets, but starting to build a roadmap for how we can tackle management of these assets as well. In the remainder of 2024, staff will be working towards developing a plan for the implementation of the recommendations coming out of this project, and we look forward to providing council with updates on the implementation in 2025. Thank you very much for your time today and listening to this presentation.
Thank you for appearing before council with this report. And as you were giving it, it struck me as to how much time this council spends talking about the environment, and that's a good thing. I can remember my first term on council back in 2014 to 2017. I don't think the environment came up once in those 3 years. Just the way the time is, everything's evolving, and this is great. This report is obviously a first step, and yeah, it's just great that that this council, along with the encouragement of the residents, are realizing just how positive and how valuable the natural heritage systems are. We hear this all the time at the region also, protecting the assets, because you protect them, they look after you. And great, thank you for that report. I open up to council. Any questions or comments? Councilor Wink.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Sam. As you were going through the presentation, something came to mind, and the town owns only a finite amount of the properties within the town of Pelham. How much of these areas are covered by, that are privately owned? And I'm zeroing in, and Mike, you'll like this. We've got a lot of forests that are on private land, and we've got no policies in place that a private landowner can just go in and cut down their entire forest. Are we looking at policies going forward to protect the forests and the wetlands, and how are we doing that?
Oh, I'm sorry, was the question to the presenter or to the?
Yes.
Oh, to the presenter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that question. That isn't a recommendation coming out of the report, is going through our policies and looking at where we can enhance protection of these types of areas. As far as I am aware, those conversations have not occurred yet. However, I can highlight, at least through my role at the Town of Lincoln, that is something that is on my work plan for 2025, and looking at particularly private tree protection policies and bylaws there. And so there may be some overlap if opportunities arise here to explore that.
Thank you. I think the CAO wanted to chime in on that.
To the CAO, please.
Well, I think that might be an excellent area to ask for a follow-up staff report. I can tell you in our two-tier system, we rely on the upper tier. It does have I think they call it a woodlands protection bylaw, but if I've got the terminology wrong, someone forgive me. And so they do protect large tracts of land. And I don't remember what the trigger point is for them. I want to say 5 hectares, but again, well, someone does know. The magic of technology. So there are protections in Niagara in place. And we could elect to legislate on that directly, but relative to the rural lands of the town, we tend to rely on the upper tier for enforcement on forestry. And we do, of course, in fact, about 2 years ago, we addressed some of our urban tree canopy through direct bylaw passage. But I think this would be a great thing for council to hear more of, and to sort of do a gap analysis and our capacity analysis. I think, well, self-evidently, there are members of the community who are interested in this topic and have come out to hear this presentation in particular. So well done thus far, Sam. But I think that'd be an excellent thing if we could either take direction, or you could, by motion, give us some specifics. But we'd be happy to write a holistic report on forestry and where we are and what we might do further, if that were of interest.
Councillor?
Yeah, so I don't think we need to go to a formal motion, but a staff report on this would be much appreciated. I'm not sure what other councilors think about that report, or.
Any councillor object to, and I don't see any objections to what you're suggesting, so I think that would be a good direction for staff. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Wiskowski. What I wanted to ask you about was, we want to create a living landscape in Pelham. And I see that on the one page, I was a little surprised to see that hedgerows are included on the list here. And I was even more surprised to see that that's the area of that is of hedgerows in Pelham is 106 hectares. And we also have another 25 kilometers of trails. Now, just thinking about that, I'm looking at some kind of a high impact, low cost thing, because when you build a hedgerow, it's not like planting trees that are going to take many, many years to mature. We've constructed the gardens up in the Centennial Park there, the pollinator gardens, they're almost like the hedgerows. They were planted by the kids during COVID. I mean, they're flourishing. So a hedgerow, I did some study in this, and we've done it on our farm. We allowed hedgerows along the road so we didn't have to plow snow. So there's no need for plowing snow. And then the studies that I've read about it, when we did this, we found out that for 100 meters of hedgerow, there are 2,000 species of plants and animals and amphibians right in there, living right there. And not only that, they were corridors for connectivity for pollinators and birds and that type of thing. And these, the wetlands and the tree in our trees, they can't exist as islands on themselves. They should be connected. So I'm just hoping that we could do something like that, because I think that's a low cost, high impact, fast thing to do. And I can predict that as they do in Trout Unlimited, I can predict that the landowners would be very cooperative in something like that to thicken up and mature the hedgerows. So I'll leave that, Mr. Mayor, as a comment and a question.
Okay, thanks, Council. Any comment on hedgerows and Pelham, Samantha?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Olson, for those comments. And just a quick response, I thank you for providing kind of highlighting the low resource aspect towards something like this. That's something that in our implementation plan that we are in discussions of having in the remainder of 2024 is something that we're looking to identify are those low resource opportunities where we can make a big impact and progress on the recommendations in this report. So thank you for highlighting that, and that will definitely be on my list of considerations.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Mayor, and I think scenario number 3 that was of the scenarios, it dealt with the interruption of hydrological processes in the town, and that included the importance of low impact development features. Could you describe that for me a little bit, please?
In scenario 3, we looked at what the replacement of natural assets would be with the built infrastructure strategy. So we looked at stormwater management ponds as well as low impact development bioretention cells. In that scenario, we found that stormwater management ponds were not necessarily effective in reducing flow rate and therefore flooding. The bioretention cells were more successful and able to replicate the scenario results of our existing conditions, our existing natural assets. However, they were noted as being more costly for maintenance, as well as not having or having an end of use life cycle in comparison to our natural assets. And so while they do work and are effective in controlling flooding and erosion, those costing implications are still a big consideration for the town.
Does that mean that the low impact development features are more efficient than in the stormwater ponds?
In this scenario, the modeling that we did, yes, it was considered more effective than the stormwater ponds.
So, and finally, Mr. Mayor, my final question is, we've just completed the rehabilitation of the Timber Creek Stormwater Management Pond, and we have some experience now, and I think the experience has been a good one and substantially done. I think the cost on that will fall within your cost estimates from within the budget here. Now, when you laid out the budget, is that an attempt to arrive at an annual budget or a 10-year budget, or what was that for I think it's 197 million or something like that? 900,000. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't want you to have a heart attack there. So, but it was some number like that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not as familiar with the budgeting process of the project. I would ask maybe if Ms. LaRoque has some thoughts on that to be able to answer.
Shannon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There were some numbers included in the final report, and they were making assumptions that we were going full in every year in terms of, like, let's throw all of this money at making our assets as incredible as we would love them to be. But there are other options, and that's the kind of thing that we're going to be looking at is is there a way to go about this so that it's more manageable cost-wise? Do we target assets that are perhaps in the worst condition first? Or a certain percentage of assets every year to maintain and do some work on. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about over the next little while while we're looking at implementation. And then once we have some numbers and some better ideas on what would work operationally as well, then we'll bring that forward to you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But I was just happy that we had numbers there to look at and start to look at and see kind of get an idea of the scale of this project and how we can get it finished. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. Any other comments, questions? Councilor Kerr.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciated seeing it. What intrigued me was that 80% of the area was either forest or wetland, which is a phenomenal number when you start to look at it. Wearing my agriculture person hat, impact on agricultural production is huge. And protecting naturalized areas can have a double-edged sword in that for a number of specialty crop producers especially, sometimes these are reservoirs for serious, not invasive pests, but indigenous pests, ones that have been here forever. They're local to us and have been for a long time. And it's something that I hope is part of it, that agriculture during all the discussions relative to this are considered. Some of us are aware of issues with excess water, even now, not in a flood instance, that is impacting on agricultural producers as a result of development, and it has them seriously concerned about future development as well as some of the things that are being looked at. So I appreciate your bringing this forward. It's nice to see the collective, I guess, of the group is not to look in isolation of naturalization, but taking consideration what commercial entities also exist that have to cohabit with this and remain viable in the long run as well. So I appreciate you bringing that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions? Not seeing any. If I may just expand a little bit on this presentation. This council, this town, and the staff of the town of Pelham, we can all be very proud of a project that we just celebrated the completion of on Tuesday, the erosion project that took place on our easterly border, included getting four levels of government to work on a problem. And I'll tell you the fact that we found the problem, we identified the problem, went out and got a solution, and then came together and got it. It seems like something simple, but for us to get four levels of government and get that done in the length of time we did, it's a feather in this council's cap, and the region, NPCA, and the Department of Oceans and Fisheries all came together and solved what was really a serious erosion problem over by Pelham Cares. And I encourage anyone on this council, any resident, to go over to Pelham Cares. I'm sure you can. They wouldn't mind if you parked in their parking lot and walked around back. And it's what has been accomplished. What used to be a 4-foot deep crease in that waterway is now a controlled flow of stone ponds, and the whole thing looks incredible. Samantha, have you had time to take a look at that project?
I haven't, but I can see that there would be many connections to this, and as well as in the corporate climate adaptation plan, and so I look forward to learning more about that project and seeing where those synergies are.
You get Jason to give you a drive over there, and it is indeed it's excellent. That's all I can say. And yeah, it's a feather in this council for doing that, being concerned about the problem that was there and taking action to get it done. Anyway, one last time, any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Again, thank you for the report. And I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by the Deputy Mayor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive the Natural Asset Management Project Results presentation from Samantha Witkowski, Environmental Coordinator for the Town of Pelham, for information to Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Last call. Any comments? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 7, being the adoption of council minutes. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Deputy Mayor Wink. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. C-17-2024, regular meeting of council, October 16th, 2024. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any errors or omissions.
Thank you. After viewing the minutes, any comments from any councillor? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 8. If there are now any items to which council would like to lift from the consent agenda, now would be the time to do so.
Okay, thank you. Is there any item on the consent agenda that any councillor wishes to pull? And I'll see Councillor Olson.
Item 9.4.1, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other item that a councillor would like to pull? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the consent agenda. If there are any members of council that wish to speak on a topic, now would be the time. Mr. Mayor, I can call them by category if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay, we will begin with the committee recommendation sheets and minutes.
Any item there that any member of council would like to comment on? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Okay, staff reports.
Staff reports. Not seeing any.
Thank you. Information correspondence, save and accept 9.4.1, which will be discussed following.
Yes. Again, I don't see any. Oh,
Yes.
but we have Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to make a comment with regards to Niagara Regional Waste. The report says a 0.9% increase. I would have presented a council report on Niagara Regional 12, but I need the region's approval to issue my minutes. The clerk has had my report now for several weeks, but it takes a process to get reports out. But I think I can give you some general comments. The contract for the waste handling at the Niagara Regional 12, which includes, as you all know, it includes Pelham, West Lincoln, and Grimsby's facility. It's an engineered dump, one of the few in the province. And the contract for handling the waste at the site had to be renewed by August 25, and that's been successfully done. And a new contractor has come in. Up to then, we'd had the same contractor since 2012. So it's a 5-year contract with a 2-year renewal. And it was very successfully negotiated. What's amazing about the site is we've had a reduction in tonnage by about 16% on average per year since 2014. So the other amazing thing about this site is the reuse run by the Salvation Army, which is at the entrance of the site. We're able to divert 40 to 50 tons of reusable stuff that people bring to the dump before it gets into the dump, which is amazing. There's no other dump or waste site that has that kind of diversion rate or that kind of facility. So there will be a report, detailed report coming as soon as I can give the okay from the region to the clerk, and it'll be issued. It'll give you some great insight. We've got facts and figures that I think are really important. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor, and I look forward to that report because it is amazing that when we pull things out from not having to go into the landfill, not dumps or landfill. It's amazing. It's so great because we extend the lifetime of that site so we don't have to go out and find another site to replace it. Last time I heard, with the recycling had extended it by at least 30 years. It's crazy.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I look forward to your report, and if you want, I will give the clerk's office at the region a little nudge.
I keep emailing the secretary to try and get it processed. But there is a process, and they only meet once a month, and
Yes.
I understand it takes a while at the region. Thank
We
you.
we look forward to that, Counselor. Any other questions on any consent agendas? Not seeing any?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mayor. The last category was advisory committee minutes. I don't know if you want to formally call for those.
Okay, and any comments, questions on the advisory minutes? Not seeing any. To the clerk.
Excellent, thank you. Therefore, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Eckert. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the November 6, 2024 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved, save and accept item 9.4.1. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate, questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 10, and item 9.4.1 has been lifted for separate consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor, the associated resolution with that was be it resolved that council receive the correspondence from the Good Roads Association regarding the establishment of an Ontario Rural Roads Safety Program for information. To
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor.
Council Olson, you hold the item. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no doubt that road safety is an issue in the community and in all the communities in Ontario, especially the rural areas. I pulled this because I think there's a better way of going about this. And I think we have a strategic alliance with the ROMA, which is Rural Ontario Municipal Association. I think they're a more effective people to put this together. I think they did a great job on the broadband. They managed that, and the minister that was responsible for that is also the minister would be responsible for this. I'm not. I guess we're going to accept this, but I would prefer to see something, some similar type of a letter, perhaps going to Roma rather than to Good Roads, because it's. They don't have the same kind of a focus, and they don't think they have the same kind of depth as far as relationships with the government. They're kind of a one-dimensional thing. So if we accept this, are we going to send a letter off, or is that just accepting it for information? Is that what this is? And I'm not sure exactly what that would be.
And I turn to our CAO, Mr. Cribbs.
In absence of a council motion to the contrary, all that's going to happen is you receive this and there'll be no further action taken. It takes a positive motion passed by a majority of you for there to be corporate community support for the initiative indicated in the letter. Based on that, I think Councillor Olson would bring no motion and do nothing, would get his goal, would accomplish his goal. And for everyone else, if you feel the contrary, you need to bring a positive motion. If not, we'll simply receive it and there'll be nothing further.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry to take up time with that, then I'll leave it as it is. Thank you.
Okay. Well, now that you brought this item up, is there any council member that wants to delve deeper into this item, or are we willing to go just with the usual? And I guess we're ready to go just with the usual resolution. Councillor Wink?
So I agree with Councillor Olson's comments about Roma, but supporting the Good Roads and this motion is not going to, it's going to move things along, I think. The unfortunate part is, and Chief is well aware of the number of rural accidents that happen and the number of fatalities and serious accidents, that anything that we can do to help support reduction of those numbers, I think is welcome. So I would like to put a motion forward to accept this letter and support of the motion that Good Roads put forward.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Is there a seconder? I see Counselor Nesnick is seconding. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you like me to read that into the record, or are you satisfied with how it was laid out in their letter?
I'm satisfied with
Okay.
how they laid out the motion.
Okay, excellent. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, you know what, just so that everyone present knows the motion, yeah, go ahead and read it, please.
Yeah, certainly. So to receive the correspondence for information, and that council endorse and support the implementation of the Rural Road Safety Program that Good Roads has committed to lead. And as the resolution reads in their request letter, whereas official statistics from the Government of Ontario confirm that rural roads are inherently more dangerous than other roads. And whereas despite having only 17% of the population, 55% of the road fatalities occur on rural roads. And whereas rural, northern, and remote municipalities are fiscally strained by maintaining extensive road networks on smaller tax base. And whereas preventing crashes reduces the burden on Ontario's already strained rural strained healthcare system. And whereas roadway collisions and associated lawsuits are significant factors in runaway municipal insurance premiums, preventing crashes can be a significant impact on improving municipal risk profiles. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Pelham requests that the Government of Ontario take action to implement the Rural Road Safety Program that the Good Roads has committed to lead. It will allow Ontario's rural municipalities to make the critical investments needed to reduce the high number of people being killed and seriously injured in Ontario's rural roads. And that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Doug Ford, the Minister of Transportation, as well as the Minister of Infrastructure, Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Rural Affairs, Associate Minister for Emergency Preparedness and Response, as well as the Minister of Health. And further, that this resolution be circulated to all municipalities in Ontario requesting their support. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Welcome.
Councilor Nesnick, you seconded the motion. Any further comments?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so being on the receiving end of several calls with regards to citizens being concerned about speeding and unsafe road conditions and that sort of thing, I would like to support this. I was sort of surprised that you wanted, I don't know what Roma is doing currently. Maybe you're more on top of that than I am, but certainly I think this is a specialty from the Good Roads Association that I think would be a good motion for the province of Ontario to be aware of, and it might be a more focused presentation to them coming from Good Roads. So I can support the motion that we do indeed move this forward as Councillor Wink suggested.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Councilor Wink. Any further comments being the mover?
No, I think my previous comments were sufficient, and the motion speaks for itself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On discussion on the motion, Councilor Olson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a couple of amendments, and I think they may be friendly amendments. The Minister of Infrastructure, her name is Kinga, not King, in the first place. The second place, the Rob Flack, the minister he's Minister of Agriculture, of Food and Agribusiness, not Agriculture. And I don't know why the name of our MP and Minister, Sam Oosterhoff, is missed there, because we're sending it to his boss and his colleagues on cabinet, and I think we should have that in there. And I would propose them as friendly amendments if that's possible. And also there's also a repetition in the word strained under, whereas preventing crashes reduces the burden on Ontario's already strained, rural strained healthcare system. One of those strained items probably should be removed.
Okay, that's it?
That's my amendment.
Okay, thank you. I go to the mover. Councilor Wink, are you, can you consider these friendly amendments, the spelling and what have we?
I'm all about spelling, so that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nesnick as a seconder.
That's good.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate, questions on this motion going forward? Councilor Kerr.
Yeah, I was just reading through. I guess it's the motion is to give to Good Roads the lead on a 5-year, $183 million program specifically, I guess is part of the question I have, when in fact there may be a number, as happens with all ministries, there's always competing interests for the same pot of money. And I'm just, as Councillor Olson brought up, I'm unaware is there anyone else other than Good Roads that are lobbying towards the Ministry of Transportation about road safety? That's just a question I have.
To the CAO, please.
For clarity, AMO is 443 of 444 municipalities in Ontario. It's only Toronto that isn't involved. ROMA, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, is a subset of AMO, so ROMA is us. And Good Roads is a subset of AMO, so Good Roads is us. Historically, over the arc of my career, certainly, Good Roads has happened at the same time as Roma and been split asunder and been married back again and split asunder again. They're like a couple that isn't sure if they love or hate each other. But there's the argument being that the rural highways are integral to talking about the municipal experience in rural Ontario, or do you just focus on transportation issues? And this goes back and forth and back and forth. But in either event, they are us. So, and Good Roads, as it's currently construed, only looks at roads and has been hived off from Roma at this point in time. Regardless, they exist because we send them a bit of money every year as one of the 443 municipalities that does participate. If, assuming they are successful in this undertaking, they will become the clearinghouse, much like they are, AMO is for a number of grants we participate in or apply to. And so, although it's a subsidiary, if you will, it is still AMO and it is still us, and we are essentially applying to ourselves, albeit this would be funds only available to rural municipalities and only for rural highways. Although I understand why both Councillor Olson and Councillor Kerr have, you can make some very valid arguments about which part of AMO should do this, and at the end of the day, they've got this far. So if they're on the cusp of getting a significant pot of money to which we would have access, but much larger centers would not, I think that part is a good thing. And the rest of it, although I could privately agree with you at this point, the ship has sailed far enough that it's, I think, moot. So we're very happy to, understanding that we just recreate the letter that we received. We ourselves will not intentionally send something along with spelling errors, and there's no universe where we wouldn't reach out to Sam Oosterhoff on this. So we take that, whether it's friendly amended or direction, we will comply, certainly, in either event. It's how they've set it up, so here we are. I think we're kind of like 11th hour, and we just want to indicate support because we'd love that to be a pool of money, because we would like to work on our rural roads, of course.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you. I just, the only reason I bring it up is that having been inside the bureaucracy and recognizing that generally they want, at the upper levels, a single voice coming to them. Sometimes you have one group saying this, and that was why I'm asking the clarification. You have a group saying this, then you have another group coming in, another group coming in. I've dealt with organizations where all of a sudden they say, look, we don't want to talk to 3 or 4 different people. We want to talk to one person. So I'm just hoping that this, from the sounds of it, it sounds like it's going through a single route. So I'm fine in supporting it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? So, Madam Clerk, we have to vote on the amendments first, do we? Or, no, the friendly amendments. Go ahead, clarify that.
The friendly amendments don't require a vote. You can vote on the motion.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no other questions or comments, I'll call the vote. Okay, all those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 11, resolution to move in camera. I have a motion put forth by Deputy Mayor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following. Section B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Section F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, being one item, cannabis. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All those willing to go and all those in favor? Yes. Okay, thank you. And perhaps before we discuss, we'll take 5 or 10 minutes for a biological.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob's got the door.
Jody, can you grab everyone from the community room? Thank you.
The other thing that our council remembers is perception.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can confirm that the live stream and recording has begun. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert, seconded by Councillor Niznik. Be it resolved that council reconvene the regular meeting. To Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Just a motion to reconvene the meeting and for a vote.
All those in favor? None opposed? Motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to Section 13, Presentation and Consideration of Reports. Our first report this morning is 13.2.1, Regulation of Cannabis Odor in the Town of Pelham. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2024-0241, Regulation of Cannabis Odor in the Town of Pelham for information, and that Council determine its preferred approach to odor regulation in the Town of Pelham, and that Council approve in principle the proposed odor management bylaw that corresponds to its preferred approach, being option blank, and that Council provide direction to staff on the administrative penalty amounts proposed for contraventions of the proposed bylaw, and that council direct that the selected version of the odor management bylaw be presented to council for consideration at their next meeting of council. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you, Madam Clerk. I will open this to council. Any thoughts and comments on this report? If I may, so I will ask a few questions of bylaw, if I may, first of all. And I haven't broached this with the CAO. One of the comments that that our odor person mentioned and thought that we would, going ahead, was to hire a full-time odor person. So during the day, obviously bylaw up until now has been doing that, and that's, I'm looking at the big picture here. In the wintertime, we have people on call that when we get a snowstorm in the middle of the night, we phone them up and we have them go out and plow snow. We have sufficient people on the bylaw, and I don't know how you'd work it out. I'm not human resources, but from your as head of bylaw, do you think that that would be possible? That if we continue to use the nasal ranger, and we had someone phone in at 3 o'clock in the morning to bylaw, is it feasible that we could send someone out at that time to do the measurement, to interview that person, and that would eliminate the need, if indeed there is a need, to hire a full-time odor expert? Because that seems to be the thing, the main complaint, is that the people are saying that this is happening off hours, whether it be a Sunday, whether it be 3 o'clock in the morning, and of course that could be very likely. So going forward, in that particular part of the report, is, I guess, you or Mr. CAO, is that something that this council could have at our disposal is to have someone on call at bylaw that if we got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, listen, my windows, the smell's coming in, I need someone here in half an hour. Is that possible? I mean, as opposed to spending $80,000 to get to the same point, we would just have someone on call who is qualified, and we've discussed this before, that anyone with a nasal ranger that goes out, they meet the qualifications, they have been trained on it. Is that possible? And I don't know, should I, well, I see Mr. CAO has, will inform us.
In fairness, as a basic starting point, kind of all things are doable when they're adequately resourced. The town of Pelham employs 2 full-time bylaw officers, and for 4 months of the year, there's a part-time bylaw officer. So 8 months a year, it's 2. 4 months a year, it's 2.5. This term of council, we have, by law, has taken on, we have strengthened the animal bylaw and specifically dealing with waste, and some enforcement actions in cemeteries, late night and early morning. And we've taken on parking at the MCC and randomized attendance either late at night or early in the morning. We try not to be too specific for obvious enforcement reasons. The town is not the NRP. Our staffing is 2 or 2.5, depending on the time of year. So we could not come out 7 nights a week. You can't send staff who work 8 to 4, 9 to 5, whatever that happens to be, every 7 days a week at midnight. But if you're asking, is it technically possible? The answer is yes. Good news is you're going to pass a budget in a month. We haven't budgeted, and not being funny or facetious, but if you want extra enforcement, that is possible. Not in the budget we put in front of you. You'll need to make some resources available. But in theory, can that be done? Yes. Certainly some weekends, some after hours, some at night is possible. It is a question of resources, and you control both resources and direct levels of service. So the good news, and you make that decision in a fundamental way once a year. Good news, you make that decision next month.
Okay, thank you for that then going forward. Thanks. Again, I'll go to council, or also I can continue my comments. I'll go to Council Eckert first.
Okay, so is this the part where I got to try to repeat?
Yes. This is where you get emotional.
Okay. Passionate.
Passionate.
Where I want to start is by saying that we should be prepared for the cannabis companies, I will say, rather than just one in particular, that anytime we're going to lay a charge, which is probably going to be the first one laid in Canada or certainly in Ontario, I would say, we're going to get challenged on that. And I think it's a challenge that we should be prepared to meet. They have a lot at stake in this, and they have a lot of money. And the cannabis industry is going to be behind the first one that gets charged because they're going to want to defeat the bylaw. But I think it's a fight worth taking, and we have very capable counsel to present that argument. I don't see that it's going to be as costly as some might think, because we are going to prosecute this in-house. Second, we're dealing with a company that has demonstrated, I would say, a very good corporate neighbor. They have not cooperated as far as I can see, in my opinion. So where do we move forward? I have never been an advocate of the nasal ranger. And if we were to continue using a nasal ranger, then I believe that the threshold needs to come way down. Leaving it where it is or close to where it is has done nothing in the past, and I believe it'll do nothing in the future. I am a very big supporter of the second option, where it is on the bylaw officer to respond. And the way that it's written out is, and it was explained to us, is it's not necessarily that the bylaw officer is the judge and jury and executioner of this, but the bylaw officer responds to a complaint. And the first part of that complaint is to go to the fence line, and if he can smell it, you can smell it. Anybody can say, I can smell it. Then you go to the complainant's residence, and if you can smell it there, in my opinion, that's met the threshold, which is defined in the definitions that our solicitor clearly outlined. So there's the guidelines for the bylaw officers. Then you go a little bit further than that, and especially at the beginning, because this is going to be big news. And that investigation has to be done properly. I've done a few in my life. Some of them, although I'm not going to say more important than this one, but some of them dealt with things that are far more serious in nature. And it's all about the investigation. And you have to be able to present the evidence in court for a reasonable judge, JP, whatever it is, adjudicator, to say, yes, this was objectionable, it was bad, and they're going to levy a fine or a conviction. It's imperative that that happens. You can't just say, I went to the fence, I went to the house. You can't go back 3 weeks later and say to a neighbor, hey, do you remember 3 weeks ago on Sunday, did you smell marijuana? Well, you smell it so many damn times that you're not going to remember what Sunday it was, because you're smelling it all the time. So it has to occur then. It has to be presented. Working with the town solicitor, she's going to work with the investigators to say, I need this, this, and this. Go out and get me this. That's what's going to happen. And then we'll start to hopefully get some convictions. Because the way it stands right now, and I've heard others make the comment, and they're absolutely correct. I mean, this whole thing started down the road because in 2015, there was a promise made that we were going to legalize marijuana in this country. And I'm not debating that, whether that's a good idea or it's not a good idea. But the problem is they were completely unprepared for what was going to come. And there was zero consultation with law enforcement. There was zero consultation with the producers, with anything. And when they started, they didn't even have a supply chain. They didn't have a supply of legal marijuana to go out to people who could buy it. So if we all remember, in 2016, the illegal sellers of marijuana were still having a booming business because the government didn't have any to sell to people. So we can only do what we can do as a municipality. We have certain powers. Now, I believe that we need to take those right to the nth degree and do everything in our power possible to try and alleviate this issue. Anything short of that, I believe we've failed. So my recommendation would be that I would support eliminating the numbers, which I think is option 1, if I read 2, and go for the, which is very similar to the way we prosecute noise bylaws, et cetera, where it is somewhat subjectionable, but with the definitions that are provided, it makes it a lot easier. So that's my position, and sorry for taking up so much time, but.
Not at all, Councillor. Thank you for your comments. I'll go to this side. Councillor Kerr.
Yes, I just have 2 questions, and it's more for the solicitor, and I want to refer to page 3, and it's I'll let you hand it. Come here. Page 3. it says objectionable odor means odor emitted by an odorous facility that is detectable at the property line, disperses, et cetera. So then you go down the next one to say odorous facility means any land, building, or structure used to carry on a commercial or industrial operation other than agricultural operation. Now, my understanding is a greenhouse and growing of cannabis is considered an agricultural operation. So is this semi-redundant in the writing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kerr. So here's what I've found.
That was my watch.
As a municipality, we are precluded from legislating anything that has to do with a normal farm practice.
Right.
So as indicated in the staff report, the Farming and Food Production Protection Act 1998 says that if an operation is using a normal farm practice as an agricultural operation, which is defined to be for profit effectively, then the municipal bylaws do not apply to it. So in order to make this bylaw defensible and within our jurisdiction as the municipality to legislate or regulate with respect to odor, which we can do, it has to exclude agricultural operations because we do not have authority to regulate odor that comes from agricultural operations. And one of the things that we've talked about in this cannabis matter over the years is the fact that we as a municipality have some ability to regulate, but it is very limited. Health Canada is the branch of the federal government that is supposed to be regulating, and as you are aware, the regulations for cannabis producers say you have to equip your buildings with an air filtration system. But Health Canada has also recognized in public guidance that even putting in that filtration system is not going to eliminate odors. So the federal government is really the primary enforcement arm, but they're not doing it. Then you take it to the provincial level. They've given us authority as a municipality to regulate with respect to odor, but hands off anything that's a normal farm practice. So what does that leave us? That leaves us the ability to regulate odor that comes from a facility that is not engaged in agricultural operations, and yet the province has recognized cannabis production as agricultural in nature. So we are doing the very best we can with the limited tools we have at law to try and address this issue. Does that answer the question?
Sort of. I guess it just highlights to me if I'm trying to fight this, I'm just going to walk into court and say I'm an agricultural operation, I'm exempt. I mean, in very simplistic terms. So that was one thing. I've got one other query, and it was on page 5. Page 5, 6.1C, about the operations and maintaining a complaint log that details the time of the complaint, the location of the complainant, if known, wind direction, and any abnormal operating conditions existing at the time of the complaint. One is, this somewhat makes an assumption that the cannabis operation knows exactly at the time of the complaint. It somewhat infers to me that a person's making a complaint in a cannabis operation, in theory, would know of it instantly. The second part of this it was the terms abnormal operating conditions. Defining abnormal can be another huge situation. Abnormal is I was told that the weather conditions that we experience, research scientists told me years ago, this is our normally abnormal year for a season. So it was a classic of what is truly, and who defines what is abnormal. So those are the two kind of words that I pulled out as having concern to me. I concur with Councillor Eckert on his position and concepts of getting to a point, but these are two nervous points that I have in the defense of it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've listened to everything and our advice and our advisors and everything, and I've talked to the cannabis companies, and I know that these are problems that have been solved in the past, and they've been solved in other industries. And I've often wondered myself, why we have a threshold. I mean, this is the kind of thing where the number should be 0. So my number is basically 0. I don't believe in the nasal ranger except as an evidentiary support. But my number is 0, so I'm going to be in support of option 2, which is the reasonableness standard.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you. Councilor Wink?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're in a no-win situation here. Unfortunately, what we've got in our bylaws currently it's not effective whatsoever. Like, we haven't had nasal ranger readings under 7. Now we're seeing that case law is saying, well, if you go below 7, we're going to be running into difficulties to enforce it. We've used our expert, and our expert is also saying, get rid of the numbers on there. Unfortunately, the municipality has got limited things that they can do. So the best thing we can do is find them. They've got deep pockets. I agree with Councilor Eckert saying that, you know what, we'll end up in court, but so what? We'll end up in court and really, hopefully the courts will enforce something, but I feel for you. Like Wayne, you were saying the other day that you were barbecuing and you can't barbecue. That's not acceptable. So if you put in a complaint, we follow up on that complaint, and then we, through our AMP system, that we find the producer. Hopefully that will move the ball along. It will end up in court, because quite frankly, well, 2 things. Either they say 250 progressive up to $1,000 or whatever for each infraction. They got deep pockets. So either we find the heck out of them and they just ignore it, or they're going to say, screw this, we're taking you to court. But that's the only tools that we've got. I feel for you. I really do. Like, what we've got in place now is not sufficient. Things have to change. So we've got to be that change agent and force their hand. And if it works, it works. If we go to court, hopefully we win. But what we've got right now is not working. So I will be fully in support of option 2. Is that the right one? No threshold. Get rid of thresholds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. To Councillor Nesnick, perhaps? Oh, no? Oh, okay, excellent. To Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I just agree with my fellow councilors in what they're saying. I just want to go over the definition of a substantiated complaint, because the wording we've got here is the source of the order. It's on page 3 of 8. And is it satisfied that the order constitute objectionable order? And I think, listening to my fellow councilors, that we're just talking about an odor. We're not asking the bylaw officer to say it's objectionable. We're just saying that there is an odor, and that the odor causes the residents a problem rather than adverse effect. And that, to me, is a substantiated complaint. And I think that needs to be clarified for me, to proceed, because what's objectionable to someone else is not objectionable to me. And what's an adverse effect is the same thing. So to me, that wording has to be changed. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go to our legal representative.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So I think when we look at the definition of substantiated complaint, it references the definition of objectionable odor, and that is defined as being the reasonable person standard. So whether the officer, him or herself, finds it to be objectionable is really not the test, right? It's whether the assessment is, would this be bothersome to a reasonable person? And I think that's a defensible standard. On the adverse effect piece, adverse effect is a holdover from the old bylaw and is incorporated at the suggestion of the expert. Were it up to me entirely, I would remove that and have a single standard for contravention of the bylaw, a single standard being objectionable odor. And council can provide direction with respect to penalties that are appropriate for that. But in my view, adverse effect is far more subjective. It also comes out of the Environmental Protection Act, which is not a statute that we can enforce. It doesn't belong to us. So that would, I think, address your concern about the substantiated complaint definition, if I'm right about what the concern is, and also streamline the bylaw a bit from an enforcement standpoint as well. So that would be my recommendation to council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. I think we need to streamline it. I think we have to make it simple so it doesn't become a big interpretative item for the bylaw officer. It either is a smell and forget about all the other ramifications of it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nesnick? Or, were you going to say something? Oh, yeah, CAO Cribs. If not, I will talk. Councillor Nesnick does.
I just want to kind of remind all of us, we'd be very happy if there was a motion to amend the direction from council for us to amend that draft, if that's your choice, and to remove adverse effect and to focus on objectionable. But I also, I'm not going to make any friends with my next words, but understand that we have we're regulating into nuisance, and a bylaw officers have to have, whether you like it or not, they have some discretion. It cannot be that simply placing a phone call means a charge is going to be laid automatically. You cannot reduce a standard down to that. We have a federal government that's supposed to be regulating and says it's impossible to grow cannabis without odor escape. Now, that blows my mind. But thank you, federal government, for setting us up with that duality of, I don't even want to finish the sentence. So that there's some reasonable public expectation, but also council's expectation. You can come up with a fairly rigorous expectation, but it is not an absolute. If there's any hint of cannabis in the air, that's going to trigger a charge. That cannot be the outcome of whatever bylaw this corporation passes for this community. That's too low a threshold, and we don't have that power to go there. So objectionable does have to have some meaning, more than mere trace elements and more than nothing. The adverse effect language we'd like to get away from, the Supreme Court said it has to be more than trivial, and it's the wrong concept because it's a statute we're not supposed to enforce, and it's meant to deal with other issues, not cannabis in the air and a municipal bylaw. But at least the best interpretation of that is more than trivial. And so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page that a phone call or a complaint doesn't automatically lead to a charge, even if there's some amount of cannabis in the air. Objectionable has to mean something more than, I don't know that I can define it either. But certainly trivial isn't going to get it done. And I just don't want us to get too excited down that road like that. We have to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. You did have the floor, Councillor. You okay? Okay, thank you. Councillor Nesnick?
Yes, thank you. So earlier I had some questions with regards to maintaining the nasal ranger, but lowering the threshold. I think after conversation, it does appear that would not be defendable in court, are defensible in court. My concern was that it would help support the bylaw officer in making a determination that, yes, a charge does need, or a fine does need to be levied. However, after further conversation and the way the bylaw is written, I'm confident that they can make that decision going forward. So my only question maybe to Ms. Sturton is, right now it says that this is only enforceable to businesses that produce cannabis. So in relation to the noise bylaw, which, you know, neighbors can, individuals can also be charged with a noise bylaw, would we ever be going down that same road with regards to cannabis odors? So, you know, if my neighbor's growing it and it stinks and it interferes with my life, would I be able to make a complaint or lodge a complaint under this bylaw?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Niznik, not under this bylaw. As Council is aware, our nuisance bylaw is on the list for a refresh. And at that time, I will undertake the research necessary to determine if an individual who is licensed to grow or who is growing in accordance with the federal permissions, I think it's up to 4 plants per person, if that can be encompassed in the nuisance bylaw, I will look at that at that time. But certainly, the short answer to your question is not under this bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And I think with regards to the comments made about the adverse effect, there are eight measures there that kind of outline what an adverse effect is. So I'm quite confident or comfortable with leaving that in there, because it does state like loss of enjoyment and normal use of property, or harm or material discomfort to any person. So those are easily, I think, described and would be supported by our bylaw if needed. So I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. A question I have for the legal. Obviously, we're changing this bylaw or the previous bylaw. If we pass something today and 6 months down the road, we decide either through legal action or whatever, that we want to come back and address this again, what are the implications, and how are our hands tied coming back again? I hope it doesn't happen, but in case we wanted to come back and make a change, what are the implications?
Through you, Mayor, all we're looking for today is some direction on sort of an approval in principle as to the approach we're going to take. This bylaw can certainly be refined and will ultimately be presented to Council in a couple of weeks for final approval. And if we get out there and in implementing the bylaw, we find in 6 months, 9 months, a year that it's not working, we can amend the bylaw. There's nothing preventing us from doing that. And even if it were to be challenged, I think we could make amendments during the ordinary course of business, even if there was a pending court challenge.
Okay, thank you. So here are my thoughts, for whatever it's worth. Anybody got 2 cents? So back when we had that meeting in July, I don't know how many times I promised citizens that we as a council were going to come back here and revisit the bylaw. And I assured everyone that we would be using, that if we stayed with the nasal ranger, we would take that down to 2, at the most 3. When we started using the nasal ranger, we had Phil Gerard, who was in the odor bylaw or odor expert. He wanted us, he was okay with us using the odor ranger or the nasal ranger. We possibly didn't go with his number, but at the time, he advised us that that was indeed a good tool to use. If you read this report that's before us now, he is in fact telling us to do away with numbers and go as our council members have indicated. I'm a farmer and a counselor. I'm not an odor expert. So it sort of threw me for a loop when we had an odor expert tell us a couple of years ago that this is the way to go, and now we're halfway down the river and he's changed his thinking. Maybe he's studied case law and he's seen enough examples that, okay, we have to go the other way. What scares me by going the other way is that we've had this kind of conversation between non-legal people, and God knows what it's going to be like when we get in a courtroom and two high-paid lawyers discussing each and every word in our bylaw and saying, well, this is how I interpret, and your interpretation, Counselor, is way off the mark. That's what I'm afraid of. And we pay for arguments, and that's what we get. Whereas if you have a number, if you have a solid number, whether it be 2 or 3, there it is, as a help perhaps. The option that has, we stay with the nasal ranger, and we also go to the other opportunity. Maybe that's, I just, when I see this, I just can't, I'm not going to vote for, and then again, if I don't vote, I'm telling this Phil Gerard, well, you don't know what you're talking about, and I'm going to vote against you. So that doesn't make sense to me either. So, I don't know, I guess we'll just call the question, and I'll see. I still believe I know what it takes. I've gone down to bylaw. I see what it takes to operate that nasal ranger. Councilor Olson said he took the test and he wasn't qualified to run it. So we know that they're trained. We know that there's a process, just that it's too high. But then if we go down to 2 or 3, we have the lowest number in North America. And is that going to be defensible in court? It's just, I don't know, the whole thing stinks. So,
That's worth a nickel.
yes, is that a nickel? There we go. I don't know. Like I say, I'm always, whenever we have a tough decision to make, especially if staff brings it to us, I always encourage this council, go with staff. They know what they're talking about. That's their livelihood. So when I have a fellow like Phil Gerard, I've met him a couple of times, and he's saying, go away, don't use the numbers, then all of a sudden, I guess, I don't know, I guess I got to go that way, tell you honest truth. It doesn't make any sense to me, but if this indeed, we get the complaints, the thing is, we got to get this thing, complaints, and get into court and see where we stand. I mean, supposedly, we've been told that Lincoln has this system that we're talking about, but they've never they haven't taken it to court yet. So we don't know if indeed this is the answer. They haven't taken it. So it's a toss-up either way we go. Councilor Eckert.
Just to kind of dovetail on what you just said there, and I said this at the meeting earlier in the year, I just want to emphasize we've had great turnouts at council meetings and at special meetings of citizens who want this council to do something. And I'm going to turn right around and charge right back to the people in this audience and the ones that are listening that we can't do it alone, and the bylaw officers can't do it alone, and you have to be willing to step up. And part of that may be that you give a statement to a bylaw officer and you appear in court and you tell them about the adverse effects on that day and why you made the complaint. And with cooperation like that, I mean, there's an old saying going back to Sir Robert Peel that the police are the community and the community is the police, and they can't function independently. They have to function together. So I would encourage everybody listening and everybody here to cooperate fully and step up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Eckert. Any more comments? Councilor Kerr?
Yes, I appreciate Councilor Niznik bringing up the comments about describing adverse effect, which adds more teeth to the point. We discussed removing adverse as a word, but maybe adverse effect. The word effect maybe needs to be added to it rather than leaving it as the term adverse, because that's a loose. But I guess where I'm coming back to in thinking about it, lowering it to a number, the dilution threshold for the machines are just talking about it. So it was to detect odor. The comment was it's strictly odor rather than the type of odor. and what's offensive to a single person may not be the same. So a threshold of 2 may be fine for 80% of the population, and a threshold of 2 may be offensive to 20% of the population. And they may find it that they can't enjoy their lifestyle based on what we're describing. So I'm going for the 0. I understand the concept of having a number to create something that you work against, but personally, I'm going to the 0 level because there's super smellers in every world, and I don't mean in a bad way. We've found this in my other agricultural career. There are people that can detect things that nobody else can find nasally. So it's a real challenge, but what's offensive to one may not be offensive to another. And we start to throw numbers around without hard documentation and everything else. Now it becomes an arbitrary number that instantly gets challenged. And then I think if we go to it's either there or it's not there approach at the human level, and harm or material discomfort to any person, adverse effect on the health of any person, these are kind of things that we can take a person into court because they're going to be the ones that are going to go along and under oath explain their position to a judge, and that's how many things are done legally. So I think it's following up the others. We got to get something down. We got to get it out there, and with all expectation that it'll likely be challenged. But at that point, at least we're going to have somebody in the legal system give us better direction than our speculating yes, no, maybe in between.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments before we, I need someone to put Councillor Olson.
I'll put the motion that we choose option 2 and put that in the slot.
Okay, thank you. And again, perhaps the clerk can summarize option 2.
Yes, so option 2 is a bylaw with no odor threshold.
Okay. Thank you. Any other, so on the motion, I need a seconder. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Eckert, you'll second the motion? Thank you. Councillor Olson, any further comments? You're the mover.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've said what I believe is all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Eckert. No, any further discussion on the motion presented to council? Councillor Kerr.
And just to confirm, this is no odor threshold utilizing a mechanical device or olfactometer, correct? Because that's a human being detecting it, in theory, is detecting odor, so it's above threshold. You see where I'm going? I want to make sure that our confirmation is that we're not attaching equipment or measurement devices to this, correct?
Is that how, Madam Clerk, is that how you interpret that?
I would actually just defer to the town solicitor that that's her
sorry.
interpretation.
Yes.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kerr. So the second option has no threshold, meaning a numerical threshold that's measured in odor units or dilutions to threshold. Now, if that is the option that's going forward, there are a number of items listed on page 9 of the staff report where we would be looking for direction. So if we go with the no odor threshold with a number, that takes care of some of them, but I would still be looking for some direction on the penalty amounts, the escalating penalty amounts, the approach to that, and whether or not to include adverse effects. So I'm not sure what the best procedural way to deal with that might be, but I would just ask the clerk to keep that in mind.
Yes, thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor to amend the motion to insert option 2 into the third recital. So we can deal with that before moving on. Mr. Mayor?
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on that part of the bylaw? Okay, so I'll call the motion. All those for option 2 as read by the clerk. All those in favor? Okay, 6-4. And all those against, I'm going to go against it just for whatever. Thank you. So motion passes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as the town solicitor indicated, she is looking for direction on the administrative penalty amounts proposed for the contraventions of the proposed bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Any council want to put numerical values ahead or our discussion? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Wink.
So it's been put forward 2 different options. One is fairly simple. When we get into the second option that says minor, moderate, major, now we're getting into subjective things again, and we may say, well, that's minor, or we may say it's moderate, and the producers are going to say, well, no, that's minor. So just keep it simple. Just do a contravention. So the first graph that you've got in there, I think, is fine.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment on Deputy Mayor's comments? Go ahead, Councilor Nesna.
Yes, thank you. Just wondering about the dollar amounts in that first chart. In the second chart, if it was a major contravention, the fine was $1,500 for each day. Up on the first chart, it's $1,000 after the third ticket is issued. So just wondering if those dollar amounts seem reasonable, $250, $500, and then $1,000. And then I assume after that it would be $1,000 every time there was a contravention. But can you just give me a little relativity in terms of those numbers that you chose?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Niznik. So those contravention amounts in the first chart are effectively based on noise and nuisance amounts imposed throughout Niagara, which is fairly analogous to what we're trying to do here. Now, we have had some discussion about deep pockets and so on. While the amounts cannot be punitive, that is the law, they could be moved up from what's in this first chart. So these were simply numbers presented for Council's consideration based on sort of a survey of comparable fines elsewhere, but the amounts can be adjusted, absolutely.
All right, so I would suggest if anybody else would be willing to support increasing those amounts and go 500, 1,000, 1,500. I don't know if that's reasonable, or I don't know. I think you got to start hitting them where the pocketbook hurts, and then if they're going to rebel, they're going to rebel. But to go in for $250, it's worth them just to pay a ticket, to be honest with you. And I don't think they're going to worry about that. But if right off the bat they're $500, so you've got it on each day on which contravention occurs or continues. But so if it continues, how do you determine whether it continues? So wouldn't it be just the first offense would be, let's say $500, and then a second ticket would automatically go to the next fee increase? Or is there like a day limit thing that, just help me out there, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Niznik, all of that can be flexible. So I think the reason that we've framed it as for each day on which the contravention occurs or continues is to allow the bylaw officers to issue penalty notices, perhaps while still working toward voluntary compliance, or just to give some wiggle room, to use the standard term. But if council so wishes, we can certainly make it every complaint that the officer determines is a contravention. First complaint, $250 or $500. Second complaint automatically attracts the higher fine, and then third and subsequent would attract the higher level. I would suggest that we say within, say, a calendar year, because there has to be some sort of reset. $1,000 a day for 365 days would be difficult to defend in court.
Yeah, well, I think the reset certainly seems reasonable, but yeah, I think if you're getting one, you get the first price. If you get two, you get the second price. And if you go to the third time, you get the third price. And then the fourth one is that same third price and repeated. Those are my thoughts. I'm not sure about support for that.
Before we go to other members, let remember that we're talking about a business that makes $45 a square foot profit. We're not talking about growing tomatoes or onions, whatever. If I don't know why $250 and even $500, I don't know why it was totally outrageous. We put a couple of zeros on that. Like instead of $250, we take it right to $5,000.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can advise that in Wainfleet there is a medical marijuana licensing bylaw. So it's not an odor bylaw, but it does pertain to persons growing cannabis with or without municipal approval. And the starting fine under administrative penalties is $2,000.
Thank you. I just mention that to council as we continue the debate. Councilor Ackert, you had words.
Yes, I would be in support of a higher fine, and I would be more along the lines of, if we're going to charge John Smith $250 fine for having a noisy party, and we're going to charge this company $250 that are producing 8,000 marijuana cigarettes a shift, $250 doesn't make sense to me, and I'm more along the lines of the mayor. Short, sharp sentences sometimes work very well, and I would say that we go to the max. Whatever we can do, and without being punitive. Yes, of course. So kind of stop the slap halfway, I guess, would be on them. Yeah. But I would be more supportive of the mayor's amount.
Any other comments from other councilors on that? Councilor Kerr?
Yeah, I support your rationale is exactly coming back to the financial generation per square foot in an operation. And I don't think, if you're following your numbers through, 1,000 square feet, which is not big,
no,
it's $45,000. I mean, I'll take a $250 hit on $4,000, pretty simple. That's an easy way, other than you set precedent on it. I concur that I think it can be higher. I'm supportive. I guess what I'm looking at is add a zero to the prescribed $250, $500, and $1,000, make that $2,500, $5,000, and $10,000 as an escalation. Just because whatever we put there is going to get their attention, and it's going to go to court. So I think we're all in agreement with that. Hearing 2,000 at Wainfleet, 2,500 is not dramatically different for a resale item versus a medically operating. The other entities are a little different. I'm sure the CAO is going, oh, well, we're setting ourselves up for getting slapped. But at some point, we've got to get reality into the game of the economics of what happens. And that's just my position.
If I can offer a commentary, look, we don't have guiding case law on yet in the province of Ontario on what's a punitive AMP. So Toronto doesn't have it, Mississauga doesn't have it, and now there's Little Pelham. I think you're entirely justified. Understand that you get to define what the public good is. You've been elected by people in this room and elsewhere to lead the community and to try to help grow and guide and protect the community. So you are well within your right to say that this is dealing with a serious community issue, and you think it's a reasonable quantum. I didn't get anxious when I heard 2,500, and I didn't get anxious when I heard 5,000. I did get anxious when you said 10. So if that's, it'll be Mr. Sturton who has to defend us in Superior Court of Justice, not myself. But I think her case would be dramatically better if the third number wasn't as high as 10. I think, because keeping in mind, we're here to serve everyone, including the cannabis companies. Right, this bylaw is meant to address any number of odorous industries, and we have some basic duties and procedural fairness owed to everyone. So if there was a different number for the third, I think you might find that far more defensible, but I think you're definitely barking up the right tree, or a reasonable tree within a range of reasonableness on the first two.
Thank you for that, Mr. CAO.
Yeah, so that being said, I'll go to 2,500, 5,000, and 7,500. I'll saw off in the middle.
So,
but it working under the assumption that you get a conviction on the first one, you have to have that completed in order to get to your second one. Just because they're charged doesn't mean that they have to pay instantly.
May I just clarify on that, if I could, please? What we're talking about in the report here, these are administrative penalties under our administrative penalty system. That is completely different than a court system where it would be charges. So what happens here is when the bylaw officer has grounds to believe that there's been a contravention of the bylaw, he or she can issue a penalty notice. The first contravention would be whatever amount we talk about. And then, as the CEO has previously indicated, at that point, there's a prescribed process in our administrative penalty bylaw for them to challenge that, but they then bear the onus of establishing that they didn't contravene the bylaw. So the onus is on them to make that establishment. If it's upheld at the screening stage, it goes to a hearing officer. Again, it's still the onus of the ticket recipient to establish that they did not contravene the bylaw. So that is different than if we go to court and we charge them under this would be a municipal act charge under the Provincial Offences Act for breaching or violating a municipal bylaw. There, the maximum fines are prescribed by the Provincial Offences Act, and for a corporation, it's $50,000 for the first conviction. But there, we bear the onus of establishing the contravention beyond a reasonable doubt, not on a balance of probabilities. So it's a criminal standard at that point, and then they do have a right of appeal to a higher court from a conviction and so on and so forth. So, but what we are talking about here is the administrative penalty system, which is procedurally far simpler. It's all effectively done by in-house, and it's faster. So because of that, because it is a situation where they bear the onus of disproving the contravention, we have to limit how high the fines can, or they're not even fines, they're administrative penalties, how high the penalties are. And I would support the $2,500, $5,000, $7,500, because in addition to not being punitive, it also must be an amount that will promote compliance with the bylaw. And I very much take council's point that if you've got a for-profit industry that's making a significant amount of money, encouraging compliance with the bylaw might cost a little more for them than it would for the fellow having a noisy party on a Friday night.
Yep. Does the rest of council concur with that, with those figures? Okay, excellent. So perhaps staff can go by those figures, please. Thank you. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that amendment did pass, so that brings us to the main motion as amended. Would you like me to read it into the record?
Yes, please.
Okay, be it resolved that council receive report 2024-0241, regulation of cannabis odor in the town of Pelham for information, and that council determine its preferred approach to odor regulation in the town of Pelham, and that council approve in principle the proposed odor management bylaw that corresponds to their preferred approach, being option 2, and that council provide direction to staff on the administrative penalty amounts proposed for contraventions of the proposed bylaw, and that council direct the proposed odor management bylaw, being option 2, be presented to council as amended for consideration at the regular meeting of council. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So next steps then, Mr. CAO? Well, staff will just implement the changes.
For the benefit of the public, staff have now received direction to make some changes to a bylaw that'll get presented, I would think, 2 weeks today. But if anyone wants to correct me on that.
No, that's fine. I would be looking for the direction on the adverse effect versus no adverse effect inclusion. That's the one last piece where I'm looking for direction, which doesn't have to be part of the motion. I can take it as direction, but I just would like to know what to prepare for next day.
Well, back to council.
Really?
Okay. So council, as you heard, our legal is looking for direction. Council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, from the discussion we've had with regards to adverse effect, as long as the definitions that you've included there advise what adverse effect is, I'm willing to leave those words in. Thank you.
Okay. Everyone else good with that? Okay, excellent. Thank you. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be looking for a vote on the motion as amended.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Councilor Olson. Oh, you're waiting for me to call the question?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to ask if there's one last chance of anyone debate or question. Yeah, okay. Any, nope, okay, no further debate. All those in favor? Okay, and motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to our next staff report. I have a motion put forward by Councillor Eckert, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2024-0209, updated Council correspondence policy S201-19 for information, and that Council approve the revisions to the Council correspondence policy S201-19 as appended. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions on this agenda item? And thanks for coming out today, residents. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Any discussion on this item? Not seeing any. Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to our next staff report. I have a motion put forth by Deputy Mayor Wink, seconded by Councillor Eckert. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2024-0140, Special Event Permit and Vendor Licensing Bylaws for information, and that Council approve in principle the appended Special Event Permit Bylaw, and that Council approve in principle the appended Vendor Licensing Bylaw, and that Council direct the Town Clerk to prepare and present the bylaws for consideration at the next regular meeting of Council. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this agenda item on the special events bylaw? Not seeing any. Call the question. All those in favor? See none opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to our next staff report. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2024-0255, Asset Management Plan and Engineering Standards for information, and that Council approves the award of the assignment to update the town's asset management plan to comply with Ontario Regulation 588-17 to GEI Consultants Canada, Inc. in the amount of $87,091.30, including non-rebated HST of 1.76%, and that Council approves the funding for the update of the town's asset management plan from the Roads Capital Reserve in the amount of $87,091.30. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any council questions or comments on this bylaw or on this agenda item? I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the staff's recommendation to pursue a single-source procurement approach for this project. I understand the potential benefits in terms of efficiency, time saving, and leveraging established relationships. However, I believe that as stewards of public funds, we must consider whether this approach offers the best value for the municipality. Competitive bidding fosters transparency, encourages innovation, and can lead to cost savings by inviting multiple vendors to bring their best proposals to the table. So the question for the director is, can this need be reasonably met by another vendor?
To the Director of Public Works, Mr. Marr.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. The answer is yes. There are other firms that do this type of work. With respect to the consultant that's been recommended, they are, if you can appreciate, there's consultants that specialize in bridge work, there's consultants that specialize in road work, there's consultants that specialize in stream restoration work. This firm focuses its efforts and expertise on assets, water, wastewater models. They've done numerous studies and works, not only with the town of Petaluma and other municipalities in Niagara Region, but also with Niagara Region. They are currently working on a number of assignments for the town, as well as with the region and some higher level studies with respect to water, wastewater. They're very familiar with our assets, and they've done numerous projects for us in the past. With respect to asset management, it is a specialized type of field. They have the expertise and the resources available and able to do the work for us efficiently and cost effectively and meet the timelines that we have with respect to July of 2025. One thing I will bring up is that the schedule that has been presented as part of the proposal shows a start date as of November 4th with a completion date in June of 2025, and that would allow staff to bring a report to council, get that endorsement on that asset management plan prior to the deadline for July of 2025. To go to an RFP process, that would probably add about 7 weeks to the whole process to establish that RFP, get it on the street, accept those proposals, do the evaluation and award. So it roughly is around 6 to 8 weeks to do that process. So if council's direction is to go to a competitive process on this assignment, then that would potentially provide an obstacle on the back end of the schedule to get this done in time.
Counselor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the timelines. I know from doing the CDM plan, one of the things I investigated, does the government have any repercussions if you don't meet the date, other than being a good corporate citizen and doing your work? And the answer was, they don't monitor what you do. That's the information I got back. So based on that, I'd like the other councilors to comment on it, but ultimately, my goal is to make decisions that prioritize financial responsibility, transparency, and the best interest in the community. Therefore, I believe that competitive process is still the best course of action in this, in my view. I have a motion prepared, but I want to hear what the rest of the councilors have to say.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Hildebrand. Before I go to other members of council, the CEO has indicated he is.
My apologies, the stream has stopped. I apologize for interrupting, so.
Yeah, it appears we're having some technical difficulties with eScribe as well, so I'm wondering if it's just our internet. Just allow me a moment, I'll contact our manager of IT. Sorry, Sarah, to confirm you have contacted him? Okay, thank you. Just give me one moment. Circulate the agendas in PDF for everyone. Again? Yeah, I'm not getting anything either. I'll send the agendas via PDF.
How come mine still works? Through Mr. Mayor, I do see that our live stream has reconnected. I have provided council with a PDF copy of the agendas if you wish to follow along, but I believe we can now resume. Okay, thank you. And perhaps you can refresh our memories.
Sorry, yes. I believe Councillor Hildebrand was asking for input on his proposal.
Yes, yes, on the 13.24, right? Wait, yeah, yeah. Yep. Okay, on the asset management plan and engineering standards, and that was the item, council, of going out to go a single source bidding and use a consultant that's already doing work with the town. Councilor Hildebrand has a motion, but he wants to hear what other members of council think. Are you indeed of the same ilk, or are you indeed okay with the staff recommendation of staying with, of going with this consultant without going outside for outside bids? Any other comments from council? I will say before the council does, I'm usually in the same boat as Council Hildebrand when it comes to single source. I've spoken against them many times. This particular time, I've talked to the CAO. The fact that this particular consultant is working with the town, knows the town very well, and I'm comfortable. And it's not a huge contract. It's not a multi-million-dollar contract. Myself personally, I'm content with, content that to stay with this staff recommendation. Councilor Nesnick, you indicated.
I concur. You stole my thunder there, Mr. Mayor, but that's okay. No worries, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from any other, before I call the vote? Councilor Olson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You know my attitude towards consultants, and you know my attitude towards non-competitive bidding. But in this case, once again, I have to swallow that because I read through the engagement letter, and I think the engagement letter is proper. I see in the quotation includes a large part of the quotation is consulting for or conducting learning sessions for council and for staff, which I will always be in support of something like that. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think looking at that and looking at the momentum that we've achieved, there's a lot of momentum around environmental, and you referred to it yourself, Mr. Mayor. And I don't want to see anything that steps in the way of that by delay, in the form of delay. So I'll be voting in favor of it, and certainly thank Councilor Hildebrand for his comments because they are important too. So I'll be in favor.
Thank you, Councilor Olson. Any, Councilor Hildebrand, do you want to continue on with your motion? I see no other comments coming forward.
I understand what the rest of council are saying. Thank you, but I'll still be voting against it.
Thank you for that, Councilor. So on this 13.24, on the hiring of the consultants, all those in favor? All those against? Motion carries. Thank you. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, we have lost our internet connection again, so I will just ask for a brief moment for the IT manager to look at that.
Okay, thank you.
We could also defer the solar roof, and there's no law on that being today, right?
Yeah, was there any?
Sarah, he's looking into it?
While we're
Is he
down.
looking into it? Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do understand that there is connectivity issues across the region. We are still recording internally, and we do have the ability of posting this council meeting recording to the website following the meeting. So the only downfall is we do not have live stream running. Otherwise, I believe we can proceed.
Yes.
I think it would be great if a member of council wanted to recommend deferring all items save and except 13.2.7 Forest Park ZBA to the next meeting of council.
Okay, Councilor Kerr, a seconder. Councilor Hildebrand, thank you.
And to Mr. Mayor for a vote on that
Yes,
deferral.
okay. Any discussion? Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That would then bring us to item 13.2.7. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Eckert. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2024/237 Recommendation Report, Application for Zoning Bylaw Amendment, Forest Park for information, and that Council directs planning staff to prepare the necessary zoning bylaw amendment for Council's consideration at the next regular meeting of Council. To Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, discussion on 13.2.7 on the agenda? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? See none opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm happy to report we are back in live streaming for now. And sorry, just to confirm, Mr. Mayor, was that also including the reports that followed 18.2.7?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. That brings us to item 16, presentation and consideration of bylaws. Thank you. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that Council for the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 71-2024 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 4507-2022 as amended, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of the Town of Pelham Council, its committees, the conduct of its members, and the calling of meetings for the purpose of revising the council meeting schedule. And bylaw 72/2024 being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a municipal capital facility agreement and to exempt the lands described in the said agreement from taxation for municipal and school purposes. Bylaw 73/2024 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 4481/2022 as amended for lands on the south side of Quaker Road and east of Pelham Street, legally described as part of Lot 237, former Township of Thorold in the Town of Pelham, Regional Municipality of Niagara, and municipally known as 729, 735, and 743 Quaker Road, from the residential development RD zone to a residential 2, R2, and residential multiple 1, exception 167 zone. And bylaw 74/2024 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 13/2023, confirming various appointments to advisory committees of the Town of Pelham for the 2022 to 2026 term of council, and to appoint a member to the Pelham Finance and Audit Committee. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any discussion, comments on these bylaws as read by the clerk? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? See none opposed, motion carries. Pardon? No, I'm on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 17, and we have a motion introduced by Councillor Olson. Councillor Olson, would you like to read that motion into the record?
Councillor Olson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion reads, whereas the Town of Pelham is committed to the protection of persons and property, including members of the public, employees, and municipal assets, and whereas one of the methods used by the town to enhance safety and security and mitigate risk is the operation of video surveillance cameras in public areas, and whereas the town recognizes the importance of safeguarding the privacies of persons whose images are obtained through video surveillance while ensuring security of town facilities, and whereas the town further recognizes that the collection, retention, and custody of images obtained through video surveillance must adhere to all applicable privacy legislation, including the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the guidelines established by the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. And whereas a policy for the management of video surveillance images is essential to the town, for the town to balance personal privacy rights with public safety objectives, and to comply with the MFIPPA charter requirements, as well as the direction from the IPC. Now therefore be it resolved that council directs staff to complete an internal review of the current use, retention, custody, access, and destruction of images collected by the town's video surveillance system, taking into consideration all the relevant legislation, including MFIPPA, the Charter, and the IPC guidelines, and to identify to council any recommendations for improvements and best practices in the town's use, retention, custody, access, and destruction of the collected images by the town's video surveillance system, and that a report be presented to council in Q1 of 2025.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any further comments on your part?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think it's all self-explanatory, only except to say thank you to the town staff very much for their help in writing that. I couldn't have written that myself, Mr. Mayor, so I do appreciate that, and thank you to Councillor Hildebrand for agreeing to second it for me, so.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to Councillor Hildebrand as a seconder. Any further comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the fact that the video surveillance is everywhere around us, I think it's important to have a policy that governs its process and procedures. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll open the discussion up to all council members. Any discussion on the motion presented? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor of the motion? I see none, no objections. The motion carries. Thank you, Councillor, for bringing forward the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were originally scheduled to enter into our second closed session, but I believe that the CIO, due to time constraints, believes that we can defer these items, and I would be looking for a motion to do so if council wishes.
Yes, so on the motion to defer numerous items on this agenda till the next scheduled council meeting, I need a motion. Is there someone? Councilor Nesnick will pass, make the motion. Councilor Deputy Mayor Wink, will you second? Sure. Thank you. Call the vote. Oh, first, any discussion? No discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? See none opposed? Motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as we have not gone into the second in camera, I would just like to introduce a new motion that the Chief Administrative Officer be hereby directed to undertake the directives as provided in the earlier in camera meeting today. So I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder for that motion.
Okay, mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Wink, Councilor Hildebrand.
Excellent.
Seconds.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to the confirming bylaw. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Eckert. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being 75-2024, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting on the 6th day of November 2024. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any discussion? Not seeing any. Call the question. All those in favor? See none opposed? No. Meeting is canceled.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, we do just need a motion for the adjournment as well, please.
Canceled, sorry.
All right, so I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Olson, that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for November 20th at 2024
Thank you.
at 9 a.m. Sorry. to
All
Mr.
those in
Mayor.
favor? None opposed?
Excellent, thank you.
Is adjourned.